Having a residence permit in another country is one thing you can do to possibly lead yourself to a second passport in the future. If you can't afford or you can't justify some of the higher priced citizenship by investment or fast track naturalization programs that put a passport in your hands rather quickly, then having a residence permit not only allows you to have a place that you can go and live in, perhaps you can do banking or investments there, but it also puts you on track for that passport in the future as a citizenship insurance policy or just a slower track to your passport. But there are some misconceptions around this, and in this video, I'm going to discuss them with you. Hey guys, I'm Andrew Henderson. If you want to learn how Nomad Capitals helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs get their second residence, get their second passport, set up their life and their options overseas, go to nomadcapitalist.com. And in this video, I want to talk about second residence and how it leads to second citizenship, but not always. So let's first just clarify the terms. We've got a lot of videos here on the channel about both of these topics, residence and citizenship. They are different. Having a residence permit in a country, while some countries define it differently, there could be temporary residence, there could be permanent residence. Some countries call it a golden visa, which is just kind of a marketing term for one of those two. There are lots of different names out there, but a residence permit allows you to live in a country pretty much always for as long as you want. It doesn't mean that you won't pay taxes there. In fact, living there for as long as you want oftentimes means you'll pay taxes there. And so we don't confuse second residence with a tax residence. So there's a lot of confusing terms. But a residence in and of itself does not give you a passport. It does not make you a citizen. And so that's very important to note because as we've talked about before, there's a lot of people out there who market, for example, golden visa programs in Europe as giving you access to travel the world. That's not true. And so in addition to simply wanting to live in a country or make investments in a country or whatever else, just diversification. One reason you might want a residence permit, a second residence, is that in some cases it can lead to a second citizenship. Being a citizen of a country, in this case you would generally become a citizen through naturalization, that allows you to have a passport. It allows you to basically be able to go to that country for the rest of your life. They can't turn you away. You can travel the world as that country's citizen, and so that may expand your travel privileges. You know, it may just give you a backup plan, maybe a plan B. Maybe it's a lower profile way to travel. I know we have a guy who's both American and Irish, for example. He likes traveling with his Irish passport because he gets treated a lot better in some of the places that he goes. So that's the difference between second residence and citizenship. Let's talk about how this works, because if you're looking at a lot of immigration programs for second residence, primarily in Latin America and also in Europe, these are programs that will lead to citizenship in the future. Not every residence is intended to lead to citizenship, and so you'll want to be aware of that. Here in Asia, for example, it's very difficult to become a citizen of most Asian countries. We've made a video about that, where, you know, Asia, there are more dual citizenship restrictions still. Most countries, citizenship is more of an ethnic thing. They don't really want people to be naturalized, but they're very happy to have you live in their country. And so if you put some money in the bank, if you buy some property, if you do something like that, you can become a resident. And in Asia, sometimes the residence lasts longer. Sometimes you can get immediate permanent residence that really is permanent. Sometimes it's 10 years, 5 years, whatever. It's a difference from a lot of the countries that do lead to citizenship where you might get 1 year at a time or 3 years at a time. You can get longer term residence in countries like Malaysia or Thailand, even Singapore. But either you can't become a citizen or it's going to be very, very, very difficult in those countries. And so those are countries in Asia, a lot of the Middle Eastern countries as well, technically Asia, you know, the UAE, Qatar, for example. Monaco is another one, rather difficult to get citizenship, although not impossible. Switzerland, just a long slog to get citizenship. Those are residences that you would probably get more for the perspective of, I just want to live in the country, okay? I like the ability to live there, or at least to come and go as I please. You know, I've got a residence permit in Malaysia. I can come and go as I please. I like having that privilege rather than just showing up as a tourist every time, right? They let me in, they don't bother me, they're happy to have me. So not every residence does that. Now, let's talk about residences that can lead to citizenship, because I think a lot of people promote this unfairly. Some residence permits require you to live there to become a citizen, others don't. Those that don't, we call paper residence. Okay, we talk about that in another video here on the channel, or it leads to paper citizenship, sometimes we'll say. That's where the law does not require you to actually be in the country for any extended period of time, or sometimes there's a very minimal requirement to be in the country, such as Portugal's Golden Visa. It's a couple weeks a year. You can do that standing on your head. But there are some residence permits that require you to actually live there to become a citizen. And so where I think people get tripped up is they look at the US EB-5 green card program, or the Ireland investor program, or one of the tier programs in the UK, where you buy bonds or you buy REITs or you're investing in some kind of real estate project. That's generally what these countries are doing. Australia, same kind of thing. These programs, especially in the Tier A passport countries, Canada as well, they're going to require you to stay there. And the higher level of the country, especially the English language countries, those are the most difficult, they're going to require you to be there the majority of the time. If you leave the US on a green card for very long at all, they're going to start asking you questions. If you do not spend 9 months in the UK, you're going to have a hard time getting citizenship. If you don't spend 6 months in a number of other European countries, you're not going to get citizenship. It doesn't matter that you invested money. So in these highest level of countries, making an investment into the country merely facilitates your getting in. Now there's some exceptions like Portugal and others where they say, okay, we'll make the process easier on you because you brought money. But in the United States, it's not like, hey, invest $900,000 and then you don't have to be here and then we'll just send you your passport 5 years from now. They don't need that. They don't want that. And so in between, there are other countries, generally they'll require you to spend 6 months a year there. There are some countries where you don't have to spend any time for the first couple years, but then you have to spend 8 or 9 months a year for a couple of years before you apply for citizenship. There are others where you need to spend the first almost entire year there, and then you can hang tight for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. There are others where you can spend 6 months there for the first 4 years, like in Ireland, but then for the 5th year, like you really need to be there. And so if you're not committed to changing your lifestyle, or if you're pursuing multiple residences with the hope of building a passport portfolio of multiple second citizenships in a few years, some people do that, then you're going to have to make sure you're getting something that's a paper residence where your physical presence is 0 or 1 day or 1 day every 6 months or 2 weeks a year kind of thing. So be aware of that. Europe in particular and most Tier A passport countries are going to be more strict even if you are making an investment. Now Malta's Citizenship by Investment program doesn't do that. Portugal's Golden Visa program doesn't do that. Cyprus and other countries don't have those for their highest level programs. But generally, what I look at is residence programs where you don't have to be there. Now, let's talk about the next thing. This is really the tricky part. Because just because you are entitled to apply for citizenship after X number of years does not mean you will be granted citizenship. Does not mean you'll be granted citizenship quickly. Does not mean that it happens instantly. Does not mean that the rules can't change. I'll give you an example. Panama has a number of different immigration programs. They have immigration programs that require close to 6 figures or actual 6-figure investments. However, a number of years ago, they came up with the Friendly Nations Visa program that made most Western citizens eligible to put only $5,000 in the bank and have some kind of vague economic tie. Now, they've talked about getting rid of that program and just keeping the higher level programs. But either way, the auspices of which this was sold, and initially I jumped on board because initially it seemed like it was going to work. But a number of years ago, I was among the first to say, it's not working in Panama, whereby the rules in Panama are as long as you keep your permanent resident status active with a day or 2 every year, you can apply for citizenship in 5 years. You must maintain a permanent resident status. Okay, so you get permanent residence when you get the Friendly Nations Visa or one of their other programs with forestation or whatever. And after 5 years, you can apply. Well, here's what's happened. And I know people who've actually lived in Panama for an extended period of time. They're not just coming for a day or 2 a year. They actually have a legitimate home and a legitimate connection to Panama. They file their application, and then it sits, and it sits, and it sits. And they wait and they wait and they wait. I know some folks who've been waiting for years. And it's not even like, oh, it's moving through the bureaucratic process. It's just sitting. It's literally just sitting on a desk. In some countries, applications have to be approved by the president or by the prime minister. Every naturalization application, where it just sits in a pile somewhere in the president's office. And so that's a way that they can basically change the rules. I knew someone who was, I believe, from the Philippines. And so they were entitled to Spanish citizenship fast-tracked because they had this connection to Spain. Their country's a connection to Spain. And so it takes 2 years of residence. They spent the 2 years of residence, but then they ended up spending about 4 years waiting in Spain, which means paying taxes, which means you're in Spain, you're not really traveling that much. 4 years after the application to actually get approved. Now that's pretty extreme. Most countries will do it in 6 months or a year, maybe a little bit more, depends. Sometimes it also depends how much money you've invested. Some countries will fast track the application if you were an investor versus just someone who had a job or family connection, whatever else. But speed is not guaranteed. Approval is not guaranteed. What's also not guaranteed is the laws couldn't change. One reason that I think, folks who have the money to pursue citizenship by investment or fast-track naturalization should consider it for at least their first, second passport, is because whenever you do a residence program, there's no guarantee. Now we can tell, sometimes, at Nomad Capitalist, we'll read the tea leaves, what's going on with the government, what are they doing, are people being approved now? Even if you do that though, things can change. I mean, the longer you're waiting, the longer things can change. If you're going to Switzerland, where it's 12 years, who knows what could change in Switzerland? Now, Switzerland, you figure they probably don't change many things. But you have to be aware of the conditions and the fact that you're taking some risk. It might be a 5% risk, it might be a 50% risk, where maybe they'll impose a language requirement in the future. Or maybe they'll extend the timeline. That happened in Belgium a couple years ago, where it was, at a minimum, 3 years. They basically went up to what I believe is kind of a European Union, red line of 5 years. There's really no country in the EU that's faster, and I think that there's probably some push there. But if you were 2.5 years in, sorry, you got to keep waiting. And so if you were relying on that second passport, not to live in Belgium, you could have kept living in Belgium. But if you were relying on that because you needed to start traveling for business and you needed that passport as your opportunity to go places, or if you needed to expatriate from your current country and you planned that, hey, I'm almost there, and then they changed it, that's something you have to be aware of. Obviously, I'm not saying that people can't get citizenship through residence. I'm saying you have to be aware that the longer the period of time, the more risk there can be. And so residence permits can turn into citizenships. Sometimes they go exactly as you hope they will. You wait X number of years, you go and take a test. A lot of countries require a history test. I think that's fair. It's important to know the history of a country you're asking for citizenship of. It's a fun thing to do anyway. They may make you take a language test in some cases, and they may process your citizenship pretty quickly. A lot of the countries that we deal with, I always talk to people on the ground. Just talked to some folks recently in a couple South American countries. Hey, it's taken 3 or 4 months. Great, right? And they're actually increasing efficiency in some of those countries. So that's a good sign. But it could also go a different way. You could find that countries change their rules, that they never intended to give citizenship anyway. I think what you can do is you can look at the direction the country is going in right now. Panama is an example. Not a bad place to live, not a bad residence permit, perhaps not a bad place to invest or buy some property that gets you in. But if you're looking at citizenship, it's one I probably wouldn't pursue. And so you want to be aware of that before you talk to an attorney in Panama, for example, or country X, who says, oh, here's how the process works by the law. Because one thing I've learned is countries don't always follow their own laws. Sometimes that makes it easier for you, and sometimes that makes it harder for you. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, Learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.